listening to the Pharmacist Answers podcast. I'm Cynthia, the pharmacist, and today you'll get your questions answered and your curiosity cured. I wanted to talk about puncture wounds because I had a guy on Saturday come in and his hand was jacked up because he had, according to his story, he had a piece of wood jam into his hand. So I wanted to walk through that story and tell you kind of what happened to him, but also the general advice that when it comes to puncture wounds, even if it's not wood, if it's something else. So he came in and the part of his hand, under this meaty part under your thumb, was red and swollen, and it was hot to the touch, even though the rest of his hand was kind of normal hand temperature. And you could actually see the hole where the wood went in, and it kind of looked like a flesh volcano on his hand. So his hand was like, it looked like a volcano because the hole was in the middle and then it was all mounded up around it. And so usually the question people ask when they come to the pharmacy for something like that is, what can I buy so I can treat this so I don't have to go to the doctor? And a lot of times there's things and advice that I can give that make it easy for you. It's very little money out of your pocket, and you don't have to go to the doctor and do all of that stuff to get a simple answer. Unfortunately for him, and when it comes to puncture wounds, that is not something that you should treat at home. Especially if it was something dirty that stuck in your body. For him, a piece of wood. Wood is not naturally sterile. I don't really know. I think it would be very difficult to sterilize wood in general, just because of how wood is made. So that's not a very clean thing to be sticking down into your body, especially into his hand. And so with the way that it looked, it was very easy for me to identify that it was probably infected or on its way to being infected. And so I usually have to walk a fine line because I don't have the right to diagnose. I'm not licensed to do that, but being able to give my professional opinion to say, this is what it looks like and this is what I think it looks like, and so you probably need a doctor to confirm that, is usually how I word that. So he had this volcano blister on his hand where the wood stuck in him, and he wanted to try to treat it at home. And I essentially had to tell him that that's probably a really bad idea, and you're setting yourself up for a really bad infection, or if you get a certain type of infection, you're going to get tetanus. And tetanus, as old-timers like to call it, is lockjaw, which is a bacteria that gets into your body and affects different things that relate to your muscles and cause your muscles to lock up. And usually one of the first muscles that's involved is the muscles in your face, thus lockjaw, if you can't get your mouth open. So anyway, that's how tetanus is easy to vaccinate against. Everyone's recommended to get their tetanus booster to prevent that. And so I told him it's not ER worthy because you're not gushing blood, but you probably need to go to the clinic and get that seen about before Monday, because this was Saturday. Big truck hauling hay. That was actually, the truck was driven by my father-in-law. So, life of living in the country, you get loud noises and loud machinery and lots of trucks and farm stuff. So anyways, that guy, he needed urgent care. He needed medical attention. He needed a prescription because a topical antibiotic, like Neosporin or something you buy over the counter, was not going to work. So here's the truth about puncture wounds, not just for this guy, but for anybody else who might get stuck or stabbed or stepped on something that causes something sharp to go deep into your body. So a puncture wound is a wound that's identified by a teeny tiny opening. So think of like a nail, generally small in diameter, like how big around it is, but it can be long. So the injury can be deep in your body, but the whole entry is really small. Versus like a stab wound where the blade of the knife is wider and then it can go deep into your body. So that's a little different. That usually leads to like lots of blood. Puncture wounds sometimes don't always bleed because the opening is so small that the blood collects inside, but it doesn't actually make it all the way to the exit for it to actually start coming out. Because of the nature of a puncture wound, that is what allows the bacteria to get stuck inside. And if you just apply an antibiotic ointment on the top of the puncture wound, that medicine isn't going to get deep into that wound to reach where the bacteria might have gotten deposited because of the dirty thing that's stuck in you. So like the piece of wood or a nail, and tacks and pieces of wire and the things that are sharp and long but skinny are things that can stick in your body. And they're not inherently clean, so they're not going to be sterile. So any dirt or bacteria that is on that thing that sticks in your body, it goes inside that wound, gets deposited in the bottom, and not every bit of it gets removed when you pull that sharp thing back out of your body. So because you can't treat it on the surface, you have to have the antibiotic that goes in your body and works from the inside out to reach that flesh that gets injured, that had more contact with the bacteria than just the surface of your skin. So puncture wounds can be very complicated. And again, if one of those bacteria leads to tetanus, then if you don't get it treated or get the booster shot to help prevent it and make sure that it doesn't take hold in your body, then you end up with some major complications from tetanus. So there you go, puncture wounds. Don't treat at home. Even if the doctor says, okay, yeah, it looks fine, it's better to have it checked out, and they'll usually give you an antibiotic just in case, because of the tetanus thing, because tetanus is much more difficult to treat than it is to prevent. So it's easier to take the precaution, make sure you don't get tetanus or any other kind of infection, and then you can stay safe and not have problems. He actually came back and saw me yesterday. So he came and saw me on Saturday. So that was Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Yesterday was Tuesday. So 3 days later, he came back and saw me. So he came in. He had a big old bandage on his hand. And he had paperwork from the hospital where he had been discharged from the hospital because about 3 hours after he came and saw me at the pharmacy, his hand volcano was so red, and the redness started crawling up his arm, like following his veins, and it started hurting him really, really bad, to the point that he was like, this hurts so bad, I'm going to the emergency room. So he went to the emergency room. They immediately said that he had cellulitis. And it was cellulitis to the point that he spent 2 days in the hospital hooked up to an IV getting antibiotics around the clock for 2 whole days. And then it was cleared up enough that they were able to say, okay, we're going to let you go home, and now you're going to go to your pharmacy and you're going to take these antibiotic pills for 14 more days to clear it all out. So that was like a big, huge deal. He said he ended up getting a tetanus shot, which is pretty typical of anything dirty that stabs you and punctures you. So cellulitis, a big deal. There is a certain form of cellulitis that's pretty rare, but can be pretty damaging, and it's called necrotizing fasciitis. And it is a bacteria that if it gets to that bottom, if it reaches that bottom layer of skin that separates all of your skin stuff from your major vein and artery and then the muscle layer, if it reaches that layer and breaks through it, then the bacteria actually starts eating. Like necrotizing means like dying, but it essentially like starts killing off that deeper layer of your body and eating away your muscles, and usually leaves like a big hole. Regular cellulitis is caused by the normal bacteria that live on your skin. Now, when your skin is intact and healthy, you have bacteria that live on your skin that help fight off bigger and badder critters that could really make you sick. So the staph that lives on your skin is a friend of yours when it's just on your skin. The strep that lives on your skin is a friend of yours as long as it's on your skin. It's when it gets into other places that it doesn't belong that it makes you sick or leads to a major infection that requires treatment. So cellulitis is usually caused by one of those two friends that tend to get into the wrong places. So the staphylococcus or the streptococcus are the two that skin-based bacteria that if they get into a wound of some kind can lead to the cellulitis infection. Now those bacteria, they live on all other kinds of things too, and that's why like something dirty being stabbed into your body can lead to cellulitis as well. The things that can happen to your skin that make you more prone to getting a cellulitis infection are things like a surgical site. So if you have surgery, if your surgical wound gets infected, if it gets infected in the layers of skin that are trying to heal up the wound, that can lead to cellulitis. Typical cuts and abrasions can lead to cellulitis. Puncture wounds, like my guy at the pharmacy, he had something stabbed deep inside of him, and on Monday I talked about a puncture wound is usually a really tiny hole, but it's a really deep hole. And so it makes it really hard to be able to treat it from the surface. You usually have to take something inside to work from the inside out. And so he got IV antibiotics. He got oral antibiotics, so that was the only way that they could treat it. Skin ulcers are usually a risk factor for people who may be bound to a wheelchair, people who may have prosthetics, people who may be bedridden. That area of skin that just kind of gets ground into and pushed on over and over and over again in the same places can lead to that skin breaking open, and which leads to the ulcer, and then that regular skin bacteria that's living around there, if it gets inside that hole, can infect that space. Spider bites or insect bites can lead to cellulitis. Spider bites are particularly favorable for cellulitis because spiders that bite you, they're not sterile, they're not clean. So the bacteria that they have plus the bacteria that's on your skin getting into that hole, along with the toxins that the spider may inject into you, lets that skin be significantly injured and weakened and can lead to cellulitis. Most spider bites that I have seen when they come to me are bad enough that require treatment with an antibiotic. So very prone to cellulitis from bites. And then a couple of things that people may not think about if you're relatively healthy and everything, regular skin breakages. So dry skin that cracks can open up deep enough to let that bacteria in and let it get infected. Hangnails can be an open wound that allows bacteria in and allows it to get infected. Those are things that you don't really think about of being like risk factors for cellulitis, but they are. And so they typically will need to be well taken care of, kept clean. An athlete's foot is actually another risk factor for cellulitis because of the changes in the skin of the toes, the webbing of the toes and the toenails and the cuticles around the nails. All of those changes due to athlete's foot can just make it an opportunistic situation for other bacteria to get into the skin and lead to infection. Some of those things you're like, oh, I've never had to deal with before, but hangnails I think we all kind of have to deal with before. To identify cellulitis, like my guy that came to the pharmacy, his hand was red, it was swollen, it was painful, it was hot to the touch. Then the fact that I called it kind of this volcano shape, it was kind of dimply, like his skin was changing shapes where stuff was inside it and causing the skin to bulge in some places. And anytime you have an injury that seems to run, as we'll say, or crawl and get the veiny-like appearance around the edges of it is a sign of infection. So the fact that it started following the veins up his arm was a big major sign that something bad was happening. And so the other way that I try to help people understand what cellulitis is because it sounds like cellulite. The places in your body that cellulite will go, which cellulite is the uneven deposits of fat underneath your skin. those are the same areas that cellulitis can happen. That's the same layer of skin that the infection can happen in. They sound the same. They're not the same other than just the location of the skin and the layers of the skin that they affect in. There's a rundown of cellulitis and how quickly his injury took him from being like, ow, my hand hurts, to, oh my gosh, I'm in the hospital getting IV antibiotics. It was about, according to his timeline, it was about 24 hours. He stuck the thing in his hand. The next day he came in and said, I stuck something in my hand and it kind of hurts. What can I do about it? And then a few hours after that, he was hurting so bad that he went to the emergency room and they saw him, admitted him to the hospital, and he spent 48 hours in the hospital hooked up to an IV to get enough antibiotics into his body to reach his hand to treat that. So that can be a big deal and it can escalate quickly. So usually not something to play around with. See y'all later. Hope y'all have a great Monday. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Pharmacist Answers podcast. The pharmacy is now closed. You can post your questions and comments on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/pharmanswerspod. Or you can email the show at pharmacistanswershere@gmail.com. You can tweet me or message me on Twitter @SinHendrix. You can find the show notes at pharmacistanswershere.wordpress.com. Pharmacist Answers broadcasts live on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 9:02 a.m. Eastern Time on the Periscope app. You can follow me @SinHendrix or view in your web browser at periscope.tv/SinHendrix. See you next time on the Pharmacist Answers podcast.